And Peter Bone is the Conservative MP for Wellingborough, and he joins me now. Peter, absolutely fantastic to be with you. First of all, Peter, could you just break down for us in layman terms what actually the Electoral Commission is and why it was brought about?
Well, the Electoral Commission is supposed to be the referee to make sure elections are fair in this country. And we can all support, I mean, if it's a fair electoral commission, if it's doing things that are not biased, then that's great. But unfortunately, this Electoral Commission, when it came to Brexit and the referendum, was politically biased. It was, in fact, institutionally biased. And it used the worst state power and abuse it could against the Brexiteers, and 4 people in particular who were the responsible person for Leave campaigns, including yourself, Darren. And I've never seen in my time in political office of the state abusing its position. And the one thing I can say is the Electoral Commission cannot be kept. It's either got to be scrapped or huge reforms take place. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting there that the incoming, or who is now the chairman, the chief exec, basically had to issue an apology. But Peter, does this tell us something about the wider civil service? I mean, you look at Claire Bassett, who presided failure after failure as chief executive and then was moved into another plum public sector job. Is this just the culture in the civil service? Do we get rewards for failure? I think it's somewhat deeper than that. I think it was the establishment. The establishment was so opposed to Brexit, they couldn't believe anybody in their right sense would vote for Brexit. And then when it happened in the referendum, they set about trying to stop it happening. And when, of course, Parliament was taken over by Remainers with the Speaker, John Bercow, allowing it to happen, the Electoral Commission went after the Brexit, the main Brexit groups, whether it's Grassroots Out, Vote, Leave, Believe, or Better for the Country. And they thought that was a way of stopping Brexit actually happening. But thankfully, Boris Johnson came along, we got Brexit done. But it still does not forgive the Electoral Commission. For instead of being the referee, they put on one of the team's shirts and played for them. And that's not acceptable. So they've either got to be scrapped entirely or reformed fundamentally. Now, I accept that we have a new chairman of the Electoral Commission. He's apologised to people who and we've got a new chief executive's coming, and most of the commissioners have gone. But I still think that culture's there. So I'd like to see at least the powers of the Electoral Commission split between 2 different organisations. So they can't be investigators. They can't be the judge, jury and executioner. That is fundamentally wrong. Yeah, because, I mean, Peter, as you well know, the Electoral Commission, and you are one of the staunchest critics within the House of Commons, but the Electoral Commission was actually asking for prosecution powers. Right, so it really could be judge, jury and executioner. Now, I know for a fact that had I been at the point in 2016 that I found myself in, with the Electoral Commission being the ultimate arbiter of the final outcome, because it was, thank God, Peter, that the police got their hands on it eventually, and they were really quite good and sorted the whole thing out and said, there's nothing to see here, move on, folks. But had the Electoral Commission had the final say, I dread to think, Peter, I really, really do. Yeah. Well, I mean, you all know, and only people who went through this know, the power that they used against people, the amount of cost that people had to defend, the absurd suggestions, the view that you were guilty, you couldn't possibly be innocent, and then there was this huge conspiracy. All of what was fundamentally wrong. And I know this affected the mental health of people. I know it affected people's careers and background. It should never have happened, because the 4 responsible people they went after in those organisations were the most upstanding and decent people of the highest integrity. And the Electoral Commission should never be allowed to forget that they failed us on that front. Now, thankfully, we do have the police and we do have our courts, which are completely free of political bias. But that could not be said about the Electoral Commission. And I'm very doubtful whether they can change on their own. And I think what's got to happen is their powers have got to be reduced and they've got to be split. So you can't have just one organisation deciding everything. Yeah, Peter, just really briefly, what could be an alternative to the Electoral Commission? What, in your opinion? Well, first of all, the Electoral Commission has got to be something that whatever political party you're in, or whatever your view, because don't forget this Brexit. You know, you had Labour, you had Conservatives, you had UKIP, you had people of no political party working together, and this Electoral Commission ganged up against them. So first of all, you've got to have something that people believe in. So that goes down to the personnel and who you choose. But then why not split it so that the functions to do with running the elections and making sure the electoral process works is done by the Commission, and then a separate organisation, completely independent of them, rather like the CPS, if you like, in relation to the police, decides whether there is an offence. Because I don't think you can leave it up to the Electoral Commission to investigate and decide that this person should have a huge fine. I just don't think that's fair or right. And you've got to have a system that everybody, whatever their political views, thinks it's fair. And I don't think we have that at the moment.
Yeah, so Peter, you're sort of hovering in between these two, aren't you? Which one do you think you'll ultimately go with?
You know what? I'm going to give the Electoral Commission a chance, and I'm going to see if they can reform. But in the end, I bet it's scrap.
Thank you. That's your opinion there, Peter, displayed in no uncertain terms.